Well, hello, everyone. My name is Suzanne Fallander. I'm Director of CSR Strategy and Communications at Intel, and I'll be your moderator for our webinar today on measuring shared value. So I know some of you are familiar with the concept of shared value, and today we're going to be discussing how to incorporate shared value measurement approaches into business strategies that really help make the concept of shared value actionable inside companies. So I'm joined today by FSG Managing Director Greg Hills and 3 other panelists: Claudia Lorenzo, Social Business Director at CocaCola Brazil; Paul Snyder, Global Head of Environmental Sustainability at Intercontinental Hotels Group, or IHG; and Janet Voot, Global Head of Public Affairs at Nestle. So we're going to have them talk about their experiences in implementing measuring shared value practices, and also share some of their advice and learnings of how they've navigated some of the challenges that they're presented with as they've tried to integrate that into their companies and capture and measure both business and social value creation. So we're looking forward to our discussion today and getting questions from all of you. But before we jump in, some logistics. We are able to answer any questions you want to pose to the panelists anytime by typing your question into the box in the lower left part of your screen. And we're going to do our best to answer as many questions as we can during the question and answer period at the end. And we're also going to try to answer any questions we don't get to on the FSG Shared Value blog. And for those of you who are active in social media, we'll be live tweeting today using the hashtag shared value, all one word. And so please join us there as well. So personally, I'm very happy to be able to moderate the panel today. This is a topic we've been working on quite a bit at Intel, and we've partnered with FSG over the last year to develop the Measuring Shared Value report that Greg is going to go into detail about, and providing not only some financial support for the research along with Nestle, IHG, and the Rockefeller Foundation, but also working closely on a pilot measurement project where we pulled together people from across the company to do a pilot on our education initiatives, using the methodology, testing it, and then sharing some of our learnings back with FSG on how you really implement this inside a corporation. So I'm excited about the potential that shared value and measuring shared value presents for not only our company, but also more broadly for other companies and stakeholders in how we can really create more value for both companies and also for society. So with that, let's get into the discussion, and I'm going to turn it over to Greg Hills, who's going to provide brief context over the concept and also some key findings from the Measuring Shared Value report. So Greg, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Suzanne, and thanks to everybody for participating in the call today. We are absolutely delighted that we have over 400 registrants for today's webinar, which is just great. So thank you all for joining us today. Let me start with a quick introduction to FSG. As most of you know, FSG is a nonprofit consulting and research firm that was founded in 2000 by Harvard Business School professor Michael Porter and Mark Kramer. We have over 100 folks around the world, and we've had the great privilege of partnering with a number of companies on helping to develop and measure their shared value strategies. So today we're talking about the Measuring Shared Value report, which I'm sure most of you have seen and hopefully read. I co-wrote this report with Professor Porter and other colleagues at FSG, and we released it in October of last year. And this is really the follow-on piece to the Creating Shared Value article that was published in HBR in 2011 by FSG founders Porter and Kramer. And it's about how to understand and track the connection between social and business results to drive shared value creation. What I want to do is just recap for folks shared value and the concept overall. The promise of shared value is really twofold. One, for companies, it's an opportunity for companies to innovate beyond business as usual, to find new markets, to find new business models to address social problems while also driving profitability and competitive advantage. And then secondly, for society, it allows us to harness the virtues of capitalism. We can harness the ability to rapidly scale up, either scaling up to a number of people in the same location or to locations around the world. The other virtue is that of financial sustainability, not having to rely on additional subsidy to continue doing things, but actually to do that with a sustainable business model. Next slide, please. So why did we write this report? Well, based on our research and our work with companies on shared value efforts, it's clear that more guidance was needed on measurement. So there's multiple reasons. The first is executives and managers need actionable data to make a business case and to inform improved business decisions. We hear time and time again from companies, how do I make the case? How do I make the case to my CEO? How do I make the case to my senior management to do this great effort? Secondly, there's been conflation and confusion with other measurement approaches. So whether it's impact assessments or sustainability metrics, these were designed for social and environmental impact assessments, but not necessarily for measuring shared value, the business and social results together. Third, folks have limited experience or expertise in actually linking social results to business results. These are new muscles for people. Fourth, businesses are leaving value on the table. Without the appropriate data, you're really missing opportunities that are right there under your nose if you were able to see them. And lastly, measuring shared value actually starts to provide a line of sight for investors to the benefits of shared value. They provide them visibility to this tangible value creation. Next slide, please. So a big differentiator of measuring shared value is that it needs to be integrated with business strategy. This is different from other social and environmental impact assessments or measurement approaches. So in the report, we identified a 4-step iterative process by which you incorporate shared value strategy and shared value measurement. And I'll take you through these 4 steps. So the first step, which is that blue arrow that you see, is to identify the social issues to target. This seems simple, but what you have to do is narrow those social issues that you're trying to meet, not in employment and environment and healthcare, et cetera, but be very focused on what you're trying to address. Secondly, make the business case. This means modeling how social results will lead to business results. It means estimating the cost of those. And it means estimating the potential value being created, both the business value and the social value. So those are the first 2, which are strategy steps, and then those provide the roadmap for the measurement steps, which are 3 and 4. Step 3 is to track progress. This one's pretty standard fare for companies. This is performance measurement. A lot of companies do this well. But the 4th step, which is measuring results and using those insights to unlock new value, is where we see a lot of companies have additional opportunity to do more. This means really understanding what's happening and then making strategic refinements in how you're executing your shared value strategy. As you think about what we've laid out here in this 4-step process, it's important to note, and if I can't emphasize this enough, if you remember only one thing from this webinar, please remember this, that measuring shared value is primarily for internal audiences. It's for management. It's for managers to inform business decisions and future resource allocations. It's not a methodology for reporting to external stakeholders. It's for this internal decision making. Next slide, please. So what gets measured? Well, the measurement, as we lay out in the paper, really depends on the unique shared value strategy the company is embarking upon. So the social results and business results that you track are going to really depend on what you're trying to address. But what's important is to understand how progress on those social results is leading to increased business performance. And this happens at each of the 3 levels of shared value: reconceiving products and markets, redefining productivity in the value chain, and enabling cluster development. So as an example, you heard from Suzanne at Intel. They have their education transformation program, which is a reconceiving products and markets. They have customized education-related products and services in underserved markets, particularly in the developing world. And the business results that they track are fairly typical. It's revenue, it's market growth, market share, profitability. But the social results are educational outcomes, how kids are performing in the classroom. And the extent to which Intel can better understand this connection between the educational outcomes and the products and services that they're providing, they can unlock additional value down the road. Next slide, please. So we don't have time to go into all the findings of the paper, and I want to make sure we get to the panelists. So I'll just provide the key headlines from the overall report. The first, which I've already alluded to with the 4-step process, is that you need to anchor shared value measurement and strategy. This is really your roadmap for how you actually execute shared value. Secondly, we need to establish a direct link between meeting those social needs and improving the business. It's not enough to just measure them side by side, but you actually have to understand the linkage. Third is to assess the extent of value creation. So this is tracking social and business results relative to costs. This is the well-known concept of ROI, return on investment, but this needs to be incorporated in a much more disciplined way within measuring shared value. Fourth, we need to distinguish between the shared value measurement approaches and other important forms of measurement. Why are you doing this measurement? What is the audience? What are we going to do with the data and insights? And lastly, we want to adopt pragmatic approaches to navigate measurement challenges. We identify in the paper that measurement can be costly and daunting. So we identify 6 challenges that companies face and how to actually approach those. But the bottom line is that the benefits of that measurement should exceed the cost of measurement, so you need to be very pragmatic in how you incorporate that into your company. So the last thing I'll say is that measuring shared value is still very nascent in companies. What's required of this emerging business discipline is that more companies are innovating and experimenting like the ones that you'll hear from on today's call. So thank you, and I'll hand the baton back to Suzanne.
Great. Thanks, Greg. And I think that it's critically important to know that this is still evolving, and I think it will be really helpful to hear from really 3 different companies and also in 3 different geographies that are operating in places around the world and in different countries to talk about what are some of those challenges, what are the trade-offs, what are some of the decisions that need to be made. So first up, I'm going to ask Janet to kind of walk through Nestle's experience, and Nestle's been working on this for quite some time. And Janet, can you share with us some of your key findings and takeaways?
Thank you, Suzanne. I'm very happy to. What I'd like to do with everyone who's joined us on the webinar is just help you to travel a bit through our experience by looking at the evolution of creating shared value external reporting at Nestle. And what you'll see from this slide is in 2004, we did start to report on societal indicators, speaking about our commitment to Africa. By 2007, we had coined the phrase together with Michael Porter and Mark Kramer, creating shared value, and began reporting on creating shared value in 2007, followed by 2008, 2010, 2011, where we did a zoom on our focus areas, nutrition, water, and rural development. What's really important about this reporting is that it is external in nature. Its advantages are that it captures, and in 2012, it captures a full set of creating shared value, societal indicators, and a full set of ESG indicators, including environmental sustainability and compliance. It has great advantages because it creates a discipline within the organization to gather the data and report on the data to the socially responsible investor and community and interested stakeholders and others. But it is not, and this is the most important point of this slide, is the external reporting does not in and of itself establish the link between social value creation and business performance. It is a process that has to be leveraged because we've gone to so much effort to gather those social indicators, but it does not in and of itself establish the link between social value creation and business performance. So if we look, if you would, at the next slide, just very briefly, Nestle has identified very clearly 3 focus areas for the creation of shared value: nutrition, water, and rural development, because these are the most closely related to our business and the long-term success of our business. I want to just point out on this slide that the metrics and measurement appropriate for nutrition, for water, and for rural development are different. And today, I'll just take you through, on the next slide, how we're making progress specifically in the area of rural development. Now, I apologize that this is a somewhat complex slide, but nonetheless, it captures very well the work of our colleagues in operations and in the agricultural supply chain and in procurement, what they have done is created a new rural development framework in which they clearly define activities that are destined to create business value and activities that will create societal value. And they also define the outcomes. What is really interesting, this is a new framework. It's been tested with many NGOs and other stakeholders, and we're in the process of rolling it out in Africa, Central West Africa, in Latin America, and also in Asia. So I think in moving forward, using an internal measurement tool that is specific to each area. Nutrition will have a specific tool, water, and likewise rural development. Here's the rural development framework. We can better capture that intersection between the social value creation and the business value creation.
Great, thanks, Janet. And so that's very helpful to kind of look, I think, at this, the way you've laid it out internally within Nestle, and I think give some examples concretely of some indicators that you've selected and are working on. And so with that, let's turn to Paul. Paul, do you want to walk us through your experience at Intercontinental Hotels Group?
Sure. Thanks very much, Zen, and hello, everyone. IHG is a portfolio of 4,500 hotels across the globe. We're actually the world's largest hotel company, and we include the brands Intercontinental, Crowne Plaza, Hotel Indigo, Holiday Inn, Holiday Inn Express, Candlewood Suites, and Staybridge Suites. So that's a lot of boxes around the globe. That's a lot of water taps. That's a lot of light fixtures. That's a lot of waste paper bins. And so if you think back to what Greg was referencing before in terms of the four-step process, obviously the societal issue that we had targeted was our environmental impact and the environmental impact of all of those hotels across the world. And then, of course, the next thing that we did as part of standing up a platform called Green Engage was make the business case not only for Green Engage, the tool, and I'll explain what that is in just a moment, but also just for an environmental effort in general. Our Green Engage tool is an online platform that allows any hotel to sign in and put in their environmental performance data. It also has, as part of it, benchmarking tools, carbon calculator tools, and most importantly, 150 to 160 different what we call green solutions that allow them to leverage best practice with regard to build, design, renovation, and operation, and then use those green solutions to actually impact not only their environmental performance, but obviously also their business performance. So it's a very data-driven platform, and the way that I tend to describe it is it's a scale, and that's the measurement part of it, and it's an exercise program for a property, and that's the green solutions element of it. And so as we were making the business case, of course, we needed to make the business case along the societal issue with regard to environmental performance, but of course also tying that directly to business performance. And what we've found over time as we've tracked progress and then measured results in the third and fourth step is that the linkages between the two of those become even clearer, and the primacy and importance of data that relates the two really becomes quite powerful. So in terms of what we did when we first put the tool together, is we modeled, as the slide says, a whole host of options or solutions regarding energy, waste, and water. We had one of the world's largest design and construction firms help put together a model for us, but as everyone knows, a model is not nearly as good as the actual data themselves, but at least it got us off the ground. And with that data and with those green solutions, we've actually, I'm happy to say, as of 2 or 3 weeks ago, actually have gotten it into half of our estate, which is an important benchmark in terms of thinking about the fact that we're a franchisor. These are somebody else's properties. They're franchisees. So we've actually convinced half the estate to actually get on board with the program. And that makes it one of the most successful subscription platforms that we've ever launched at IHG. And it was because of that data, and it was because of the iterative process of going through steps 3 and 4 and then looping back around. Because what we've been able to do over time is actually measure not only the return on investment of the individual solutions, but also what we sometimes call the return on carbon. And to be able to intersect those two and allow us to then feed out to properties to say to them, here are the solutions, here are the things that you can do with your hotel that have got the highest return on both investment and carbon, which then gives you the highest return on creating shared value, is something that has been very powerful. And the fact that it is data-driven, we get real-time data from all of our properties, what we're presenting to properties in terms of payback periods, returns, carbon impact, water impact, waste impact, all the rest of it, is now gone beyond the modeling we've done before and is actually based upon the real-world results that we're getting from our properties. And one other thing that is highly helpful as we make these solutions applicable and relevant to different owners is different owners have got different needs and different sensitivities. So there are some owners that would rather go much higher towards the environmental side, not worrying about the potential return, and some owners that want to have a floor of a return from a financial perspective and want to know what's the maximum environmental impact I can get for a certain level of return. And so that data process that we go through and sort of the virtuous circle that we go through between going through steps 1, 2, and then tracking progress through 3, and then measuring those results in order to unlock new value is something that, again, it sort of has taken off under its own momentum and is really it has really provided something that's very relevant to our properties. And from a business case perspective, we don't have to say this is what we think it'll do. We've actually got performance data both in carbon and also, or any of the environmental measures, carbon, and water, waste, energy, and also on return data, which then the business case makes itself. So that's essentially the journey that IHG has been on, and it's been one that, again, has been one very much about momentum once we get through that track progress and then measure results part. That's really what's given us the momentum and has given momentum to the tool throughout our estate. And so that's what I was going to relate to everyone today. Again, thank you for being on the call, and Suzanne, I'll pass it back to you.
Great. Thanks, Paul. And I think you brought up a really interesting point in terms of not just needing to make the business case internally, but also to business partners, whether that's your franchise owners or, you could think of with other companies or examples with suppliers or key customers, et cetera. So I think that's something, another use of some of this data that can be leveraged. So finally, before we get into Q&A, I'm going to hand things to Claudia, and she's going to talk through her experience. So this is your last chance to get questions, and we've got a bunch that have already been submitted. So start thinking if there's any that you wanted to submit for some of the other presenters, and also Claudia as she goes through. So Claudia, let me hand it to you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you to all. Good afternoon. First of all, let me thank you for this great opportunity to exchange experiences. This is a wonderful topic. And before going for the measurement itself, I'd like to share a little bit about our context, about Coletivo, that it's our shared value bet here in Brazil. So Coletivo for us is the way we want to deliver social change in large scale, using everything we have in our business, using our stronghold. It's about capillarity, it's about brand connection, it's about the whole value chain that impacts a lot of people, in a way that we can deliver business value back and build a sustainable model. The business case here was very clear. Some years ago, we identified a lot of needs inside the communities in Brazil. The one that we found in every single community, youth with low opportunities in terms of marketplace because they have low education in one hand. And the other hand, small retailers lacking of business support, of services, because the business models at that moment was not designed to deliver specific support to that kind of business. So our hypothesis there, our business case, was about training youth in technical skills and also about life skills in retailing in a way that they could support small retailers inside their communities about that small tips in business. At the end of the course, we would help youth finding a job with our value chain, with our partners, and deliver a business case for each small retailer in the community in a way that they could develop their business with the youth support from their communities. So at that moment, it was just an hypothesis, and we had to apply a very rigid discipline to understand if it was the case. So we had to test, prove, improve, and consolidate. And only a fact-based dialogue could build this culture internally, right? So going now to measurement itself, let's say that first we apply the same methodology, the same process, the same routines that we have in our business approach. sometimes even more rigid because we have to prove the case, right? We have monthly management reports. We have monthly operational reports to understand what is happening in every single coletivo. We have 150 units in the whole country, and we measure everything that's happening there. So we can compare, we can create clusters, we can understand everything that's happening there. But most important here is not the process, but the trigger is about combining social and business results. We have a set of metrics. In the social side, we measure long-term benefits like self-esteem and confidence in the future, and also in short-term, income and jobs. At the business side, we measure sales income and brand relevance that we generate inside the community. And the beauty here is to combine these elements. We understand nowadays how social results impact in business, and the opposites also. So this was the key for us. And the key benefits and the key learnings that we have here is about first creating a culture. Of course, it's beautiful and it's very inspiring to understand that we can generate social changes using our business. This is wonderful. But most important, on the top of everything, is about creating that fact-based dialogue among all of us. Only that can prove this power combination about social and business impact, right? Second is about refining the strategy all the time. Just to give you an example, when we started the program some years ago, we used it to be very focused on the technical skills for youth, and realized after 1 year of the program with a lot of tracking that the huge problem for them was the self-esteem. So we changed our methodology and put much more focus on the softer skills, on the life skills, to support the guys in terms of confidence and to understand the career with more confidence, right? Third, based on this refining strategy all the time, we have a lot of segmentation. Now we have a lot of clusters inside coletivo. For instance, we can compare geographically north and south. We have different levels of employability, and because of that, we understand the reason why some qualitative topics also, and because of that, we can apply different solutions depending on the reality. So for the south of Brazil, we understood that the youth understand that they can have better first job opportunities, even with low education, because of the economic growth of the country. So sometimes they don't go for opportunities just because of that. So we have to reinforce the importance of stages in career with specific workshops and specific tactics for this kind of realities, right? And the fourth benefit that we have with measurement is about having an educated dialogue with our partners. We have to be very clear about our strategic intent in terms of social delivery. We cannot solve everything, and we have to be very clear and very focused on what we want to deliver and how to measure the topics that we want to deliver. So having this measurement process helps us a lot to educate and also to have the right partners to complement our expertises. To conclude, now I'd like to have two specific thoughts on that is very important for us here in Coca-Cola Brazil. First of all, measurement itself is as innovative as shared value is. And because of that, we have to innovate and think in different ways all the time. For a while, we have stage 1 of measurement, and now we are thinking about stage 2, a new generation of measurement, of metrics, of long term. We want to think about 10 years, what is happening with the community, for instance. And second is that we are not talking about an area. We are not talking about a program. We are talking about a business case that the whole organization are engaged. I'm sure that our president, Coca-Cola Brazil president, are joining the webinar also. And he understands about shared value as much as I understand. Why? Because we created that dialogue. We created that fact-based dialogue. We created that actionable data sets that we are now comfortable with. And because of that, we could expand the activity in terms of geography, but also in terms of models in the value chain. We started with the youth, the one that we are talking here, but now we have 7 models in the whole value chain. So we are talking about the rural area. We are talking about the recycling, for instance. In the whole value chain, we can deliver something because we understood that we could combine these two sets of social and business benefits, right? So here I could stay for one day talking more, but I will finish and I will turn to Suzanne. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Claudia. So thank you for the 3 of you and Greg for providing the context at the beginning, and so let's get into some of the questions that have come in, and I'll tee up one bit more basic question that, Greg, perhaps you want to start off with. There's a question that came in about, well, what is the standard, if there is a standard yet, in measuring shared value?
Sure, Suzanne. Yeah, I think that at this point it's so early stage in companies developing their approaches to measuring shared value that there isn't one standard, and so that's the first point. The second is that this is a little bit different than the standardization of sustainability metrics, if you will. As I said earlier, if you have a unique strategy and a unique approach to solving a social problem within your company and within your business model, then that's going to lend itself to having more unique approaches to measurement. So it is actually more difficult to standardize across companies. So I think that we probably will see some emergence, certainly around certain social issues or certain industries, whereby things will become a little bit more common. But right now we haven't seen that yet.
And kind of related to that, there's two different questions here that kind of get at this concept, and a little bit of clarification perhaps from you and from Janet on, you had said that this is primarily for use internally, the measurement kind of methodology and approach, but then of course Janet talked about how she uses it externally, and clearly, being able to communicate this like with business partners and investors are looking for kind of the business case as well. How do you kind of reconcile those, and where's the priority versus the different audiences?
Yeah, do you want me to start and then I'll hand it over to Janet?
Yeah, that's great. That's perfect.
So so briefly, it's good. Someone had a great question about reconciling those. So I probably overemphasized the point to make the distinction between a lot of the measurement and reporting that folks do externally, and that this is really meant to be a measurement approach for internal decision making. That said, and I think it's very important to note this, and I'm sure Janet will back this up, there are companies we know, Nestle's one of them, Becton Dickinson's another one, whereby the reporting of the value that's being created in this business, if it's material to your business, if it's large enough, that it is actually important to communicate this to investors who are looking at your company and looking at the value creation opportunities and how driving social progress actually does create significant value for the company. So that's an important external audience that certainly needs to be taken into account. But I think the primary sort of first step is to actually create the data and information that can be used internally for decision making.
Great, thanks, Janet.
Do you want to add?
Yeah. Yes, I think Nestle would look at it just slightly differently. We think that both the external reporting and the internal decision-making tools are really very important. The external audiences, there are great expectations among investors, stakeholders, employees, and more to really assess our social impact, if you would. And so you'll note that on the slide full of pictures of reports, in 2012 we renamed our report the Nestle in Society, Creating Shared Value and Meeting Our Commitments report. In other words, it's not just reporting on nutrition, water, and rural development, but it's reporting on a full set of environment, social, and governance indicators. And we think that kind of reporting is really very important part of, it's our responsibility today. It's a basis for transparency and engagement. But you can build on that. Some of the indicators then do feed into your internal tool. So for example, on the Rural Development Framework, which is indeed an internal tool to help us improve our collaboration with farmers, help us to really work so that their productivity is increasing, they're more resilient to external shocks, their net incomes are increasing. We need that internal tool also to help us assess how are we doing with the 680,000 farmers we work directly with, and someday we hope to be able to assess how we're doing with a far broader scope of the 5 million we reach across all our commodities. So they're two different things. One is really societal reporting or ESG reporting, and the other is an internal creating shared value tool. But the process of gathering indicators is something you have to get good at for both.
Great. Thanks, Janet. This is a question that I want to throw out there. Maybe Paul or Claudia, you want to weigh in on this one, but I think it's a question that comes up quite a bit when people are starting to think about shared value. The question is, are companies really willing to take the hit in their profit margins, if it means they're creating social impact. What's the balance, and is there a threshold of business results that have to be achieved?
Can I take that one? It's Paul.
Yeah, perfect.
It's not a zero-sum game or either or. In fact, what we found is by concentrating on, as in our example, on environmental impacts, we've actually driven greater profitability through our estate. So in fact, and I think this is really sort of foundational to the whole shared value frame, it's that to be competitive and to be more profitable, to have better business results, full stop, you need to think about your societal impacts. You need to act on what you see there and what you measure there and what you effort against there. So from IHG's perspective, we're not giving anything away by having a concentration on societal impacts. We feel that it's making us more competitive. We see that it's making our hotels more profitable. And in general, it's buttressing the business results. And that resonance between our societal results and our business results is something that we see is incredibly powerful and something that we just are seeking to do more of across bigger parts of the estate.
And kind of as a follow-on to that, obviously one person asked about time horizons. So when you're looking at business results, you might be able to see some results would be more long-term, but within IHG, have you needed to look at different hurdle rates or different time frames for which you're going to expect the business results for some of these?
Well, again, it's primarily someone else's business and somebody else's dollar.
Right.
And so the fact is that because of the data that we've got, they can scale that according to their own feelings, their own priorities. If you have someone who's a hotel owner that's looking to flip an asset in 2 to 3 years, we can actually filter through and pull up for them all of the green solutions that have a payback period within that time. Conversely, if you've got someone who's a long-term hold on an asset, and they're willing to put in the money up front, and of course the time down the road to wait for that money to return, then they can do that. Again, it's like anything else. It's sort of putting up a shelf with a lot of different options, depending on which each individual's owner's needs and priorities are, and allowing them to take advantage of that. And one other thing I would mention, which is, and something that doesn't get talked quite enough about, which is when people talk about return periods, particularly with regard to assets, physical assets like buildings, remember, and I have to remind some of our finance people sometimes about this, that valuations of physical assets are done off cash flows. So if you do something within a building that automatically or in near term actually starts benefiting the cash flow in terms of its net operating impact, that's something that feeds straight into your valuation right away. You don't have to wait for a payback period for that. Mm-hmm. And so there are lots of different pools of measurement and data with regard to shared value that a lot of people just haven't thought of or aren't mining yet.
Great. Yeah, that's helpful. And Claudia, did you want to add anything to that from your experience?
Yeah, I'd like to build on Paul's comment. First of all, we don't choose. We have a balance from social and business. And we understand already that by supporting social demands, we'll have better business results. It's proved already by measuring everything that we have. And also something that I think it is smart in terms of engagement is to combine short and long-term benefits and results in both sides, in social and business. So, of course, in terms of sales increase, you can measure every month. When you talk about brand relevance, brand contribution, time goes a little bit more longer. But now with 4 years, I think we had the discipline to wait, and we're starting to see all the results. Both combined are very powerful. In the same way in the social. We can have very, very short benefits for communities like income and jobs, but on the other hand, the thing that will change our lives is about confidence in the future, and it will take a little bit longer too. So that is the powerful combination to engage both sides.
Suzanne, this is Janet. If I can just add one thing quickly to the question of time. For Nestle, creating shared value does absolutely require a long-term perspective. If you think about building relationships with farmers to increase your own crop supply and quality, I mean, you build those relationships over long term. Likewise, I just wanted to illustrate the kind of decision-making you have to make when you take a leap of faith into creating shared value. And I illustrate it in the nutrition arena, where, for example, Nestle has now a very large business that is micronutrient fortified, both in our Maggi business, in affordable milks, in cereals and other. And that decision to fortify a product where you cannot, especially when you're reaching emerging consumers and lower parts of the lower socioeconomic groups, you absolutely have to make a decision that fortification is something that benefits the society, and you cannot pass on the entire cost, for example, of adding iron to iodine. And what you have to believe, and indeed it is proven, that over time you achieve so much greater growth that it compensates for any upfront investment decision. So there is this time element, and taking a long-term view is really important.
And following on to that, you mentioned a little bit about kind of how to structure stuff. So I guess a question that came in, and maybe each of you could briefly talk a little bit about how this is structured within your organizations, and what kind of collaboration or different business groups have you involved in your strategies?
I can go on that, right?
Sure, great.
Okay. So we have a very small structure in Brazil related to shared value, but in fact, as we have a joke here in Brazil that says that my head count is the whole organization, meaning that we are all now engaged. We are now all working on developing these new business models as we touch the whole value chain. So I go to rural area, I have to work very close with the technical area. I go to services, I have to work very close with marketing. I go to recycling, another area. So we touch the whole business, we touch finance, we touch operations, we touch commercial, we touch everybody. So we work as coordinators, as culture development thing, but the business itself, it's from all of us.
Great. Janet or Paul, either of you want to weigh in on that?
Oh, well, for Paul, the easiest and perhaps most accurate question is everybody, because it obviously touches on so many different parts of the business. But I would say probably we concentrate on linkages between our hotel operations and our hotel operations consultants, and also our design and engineering departments.
And I'll just add something, if I may. At Nestle, creating shared value is managed. The creation of shared value goes on in the business. So, for example, the work that I just mentioned in the area of rural development, it's managed by our colleagues in operations. Likewise, in the water arena, in the nutrition arena, you're very much working with the strategic business units as well as the research and development community. So creating shared value is both the responsibility of different functions and also the responsibility of the market heads and the responsibility of the senior leadership. It starts at the top of our company in the CEO and the chairman and goes through all the functions and the geographies.
Yeah, and I think that's been our experience too, is that I think the benefit of this concept and the measurement approach has been really to engage directly with the different business groups and have them help lead those strategies and own those strategies. Obviously collaborating with others in our organization that have a long history of doing measurement of social impact of programs and stakeholder engagement, et cetera. So I think that integration piece and how this helps to integrate the measurement of all of these things that are really hard to measure sometimes into the core business strategies is important. And this really leads to another question that came in on the broader question of employee engagement. So obviously you have your engagement with the different business groups and business heads, but in terms of it more broadly engaging employees, have any of you had experience or thoughts on what works in terms of engaging employees more generally in this concept that it's preferable and good to find ways to drive both business value and social value together?
If I may, I'll just step in on behalf of Nestle. We're looking at very interesting models for engaging our employees. One of the ways, in fact, is we work with our social media teams. to be able to bring up the stories, because for every farmer program that we have, there's a gentleman who is an agronomist who's working on the field with those farmers, and he has stories to tell. Likewise, the sales teams who are working on our Maggi spice kits in India and working with an NGO, they too have stories to tell. So you can take it down to a personal level, and that's something that we're working on so that employees can tell stories to each other.
Can I jump in also?
Yes, please, Claudia.
Okay, in our case, in Coca-Cola Brazil case, I think our engagement model is about on the job. We are using all expertise from all areas. So what I feel, what we have here as an experience, that everybody wants to contribute. Everybody wants to have their business models in their areas. So what we try to do is to support and stimulate them to create their models and to support the ones that we have already. And also put them very close to the impact, to the final result. We had started last year with finance groups, a very good experiences that make everybody go and visit the social result of their business models. So we had that one day where the whole finance area went and spent one day with the youth in a poor community exchanging experiences. The results here was amazing, great. Everybody feels like owners of the activities. Everybody wants to contribute. I receive a lot of tips, a lot of ideas, a lot of suggestions, every day, because they feel like owners.
And for Paul and IHG, I think sometimes it's not so much a question of us engaging the employees because they're engaging us so much. We hear throughout all the different channels that we have set up for employees, both to talk to their owners and to talk to us here in headquarters, how important these societal dynamics and issues are to them and how they want to work for companies that are doing authentic things and meaningful and impactful things around these issues. So we also use social media. We use all sorts of other employee communication platforms. But, I mean, the one thing that certainly is very true for us is the employees are making sure that their voices are being heard around these issues because of who they want to work for versus who they don't.
Great. Thanks, Paul. This one question I think is interesting that is really more of, I think, a good chicken and egg question. So the question was, why does, FSG's model start with the social issue? Shouldn't it start or couldn't it start with the business issue? I don't know, Greg, if you want to weigh in on that one or if anyone else.
Sure. No, that was a great question, and you always have to overlay your business strategy in that. But I think the point with the understanding the social issue is that it shouldn't be about, if it's a product strategy, it shouldn't be about pushing out a product or service without understanding and really doing the market research to understand the needs around that social issue that you're seeking to solve. And then, if it's a product, again, doing the R&D and innovation to meet that need. So that's one point. And the second is that we do often see this confusion or conflation of, wanting to address multiple issues through an effort, whether it's economic development or healthcare or education, and wanting to know all of the impacts from a certain effort. And to be able to focus in on the social issues that you're looking to move the needle on through your value chain activities or products and markets is really important so that you stay focused on the particular issue and you can put that into your business case as you're making decisions.
Great. This other question gets into more of the nuts and bolts a little bit in terms of, well, how are companies coming up with their social benefit indicators? Are companies hiring staff to do this work, and are they using current staff or are they outsourcing it? And I can just comment a little bit on Intel's experience in terms of we have had some of our education programs and strategies in place for many years, and so we actually have a team internally with a number of PhDs who specialize in evaluation and research that have been working on this, but we also do partner with third parties who have expertise in social impact analysis. So I know for us it's a hybrid approach. I know, Janet, I think you could jump in on here too.
I would say exactly the same thing. For us, it's definitely a hybrid approach. In fact, our rural development framework, we took it out and had it pressure tested by a number of stakeholders in what we call stakeholder convenings. We also really developed it together with the help of some expert NGOs like Solidaridad, likewise the Danish Institute of Human Rights, and the Fair Labor Association. So in order to get this right, you really need experts, and also what we're seeing on the ground is the implementation of, say, the rural development framework requires data input by partners in the different countries. And it may, whereas the framework will be the same, the data sets have to come from different partners who have that information. And that could vary if you're in Ivory Coast or if you're in Vietnam or somewhere else. So very much a partnership effort.
Great, thanks. Here's a question related to, obviously we've got large companies on the phone. This is a question about applicability of the framework to startup companies or smaller companies, or even, it sounds like from this question, for something that, a company that is more of a B Corp from the beginning, looking at both the social and business impact together. I don't know, Greg, if you want to talk about how this can or is being leveraged by different types of companies and size companies.
Yeah, absolutely. The short answer is that, for a B Corp or a social enterprise that is founded from the beginning with this joint goal around business and social goals, this absolutely is the right model and framework to use to do that. In a sense, a lot of the larger multinationals that may not have started with this in mind in certain business units or around certain efforts are retrofitting from existing business processes to something that is included in social and business. But if that's the core purpose of your organization or company, then it's actually much easier and makes a lot of sense.
Great. And two questions that kind of touch at this piece on philanthropy. So one question asked, what's the role of the corporate foundation in all of this if you have one? And also, for companies that have utilized philanthropy, as part of the mix of their portfolio approach to driving social impact, how does shared value fit in this? And does it complement? Does it replace? I don't know if anyone wants to talk about, how this fits into the rest of what you're doing. Obviously, not everything you do in this space is a clear shared value strategy.
Okay. In the case of Coca-Cola Brazil, we have a foundation, and the foundation has a very important role in the shared value. How they are responsible for the social technology and the social delivery. So the business side is done by all the traditional team, while everything that is related to the social, the benefits, and the community understanding and delivery are made by our foundation. So both are working together, and they are feeding each other with knowledges and new thinking, new perspectives, and new culture.
Great. Thanks, Claudia. Janet, Paul, do you have anything to add there?
Just very briefly, we believe that corporate social responsibility and corporate foundations are very important, but that is very separate. In fact, in our case, there is a Nestle Foundation. It's entirely organizationally separate, and that creating shared value is integrated in the core business, and that's what makes it long-term sustainable. Will not change because it reinforces the societal value, reinforces the business value. So we do see them as distinct, but both are important.
Yeah, for IHG, I think we would say ditto to that. For us, it's really about the integration with the business. However, both are important.
Great, thanks. And Greg, this is a question really that gets into the kind of comparison of this measurement approach to other types of external reporting that are also continuing to evolve. Obviously, we're seeing a lot of talk around integrated reporting, which is trying to get at the connection of business value, and some of the work that Puma has done to try to value and monetize some of the social and environmental reporting. Can you talk a little bit about how do you feel that the shared value approach and measurement in the long term, or even, how does it nest with the other existing external reporting frameworks like GRI and others that are out there?
Yeah, so a couple things. Obviously, the creating shared value and measuring shared value is one piece of a much larger pie on how companies engage with society and how they report how they engage with society. So, for example, Janet's report her creating shared value report is broader than the actual shared value elements. It includes a lot of sustainability and transparency around their work. And I think that from an integrated reporting perspective, our view on that is that it's good if it's integrated in terms of not just having the reports side by side, your business results on one side and your social reports packaged together in the same report, but actually moving to the point where you see the returns of your social returns and business returns and the linkage between those, and that it's actually integrated in how you develop and report on the outcomes from your business. And that's what we would see as a good trend. I think there's a lot of early stage discussions around integrated reporting which are taking into account the GRI and sustainability metrics as well as shared value, and I think that's still emerging, and we look forward to having further discussions with folks on that and how to best make that work for the range of audiences that seeks to address.
Great, thanks. And just a time check here before we wrap up. Just one final question to let any of you weigh in on real quick. If you had one bit of advice or key learning or surprise that you've encountered from trying to integrate this, what would it be? Kind of recommendations for other folks on the call who are getting started and what they should know before they start.
I'll go back to, if I may, go back to something that Greg said, which is it is that identification of your focus areas. You cannot create shared value everywhere and anywhere. And so you really have to think very carefully about where do you focus your efforts and which efforts societal arenas really reinforce your business growth and profitability. So that's the most important first step, and then obviously once that is done, you can elaborate on the measurement.
Great, thanks.
I would complement it to different angles. First is to have a very strong discipline to follow a process, to measure and to learn. And second is to have courage to innovate all the time, because this is about a new world. So we have to test. We have to take risks.
For Paul at IHG, I think it's for some things we thought that would go a lot faster went slower, and then vice versa. Things that we thought would take a long time went a lot faster. I think that the newness of this framework and paradigm mean that sort of our almost intuitive and internal clocks about how quickly or long it takes to get something done, get something agreed to, or get critical mass or momentum against something is a learned behavior that is to come. But I would say that a surprise for us has been again, how some things have gone a lot faster than we thought they would, and some things have gone more slowly.
Right. Like any behavioral change inside a company, organizational change, it is about understanding the time horizon and what's easy and what's hard. So,
yeah.
Great. Thank you all. With that, I'm going to turn things back to Greg. Just a quick reminder: a number of questions have come in about the slides, and I know they are posted on the website here, the webinar site for download under the resources tab, so they'll be available for you to download. Greg, why don't you wrap us up?
Sure. I want to take 1 minute and share about the Shared Value Initiative, which is an initiative that was launched in September of last year to advance shared value globally. The SVI is essentially a community of practice for shared value practitioners of all types. So not just companies, but civil society, governments, academics, investors. And the objective is to provide research, tools, and case studies to help deepen folks' understanding of how to do this effectively, but also to provide a place for dialogue and knowledge sharing through events and through webinars like this and other ways to engage. It's important to note for folks on this call, we see you as part of this emerging community of practice around shared value, and we encourage you to get involved, and there's several ways to do that. One, we're having the 3rd annual Shared Value Leadership Summit in Cambridge, Massachusetts on May 23rd of this year. The theme of that summit is transforming the DNA of your business. So looking at how to design and implement shared value strategies. We're going to have Michael Porter speaking. We're going to have Nestle's chairman, Peter Brabeck, speaking. So look for that. It's an invitation-only event. And secondly, we're going to launch sharedvalue.org, a website that will serve as the virtual home for all of this that will be launched at the summit. So that will have tools and resources and be a place to engage. And the last thing I'll say is if you're interested in receiving an invitation to the summit, or if you have content that you want to share on sharedvalue.org, I encourage you to contact Justin Backley, who is the Executive Director of the Shared Value Initiative, and his contact information is there on the slide. Next slide, please. So thank you all for joining the conversation today. This was wonderful, fantastic questions from folks. We really appreciate the substantive engagement, and we'll continue some of this conversation on the FSG blog, as we said. Thank you to our moderator, Suzanne, and to our panelists, Paul, Janet, and Claudia. And one request from folks, if you could please help us improve our future webinars by filling out the brief survey that will pop up at the end of this webinar. And lastly, there's going to be a recording available in the next day or so on FSG's website. So if you have colleagues that you want to send it to, certainly pass that along. So thanks again for joining, and I wish you all a wonderful rest of the day.